Alright, devlog for March 2022. This is a bit earlier in the month, but I'm doing it right now because I right now have the time and I won't in the upcoming days. So let's just do an early devlog. Um yeah, so first of all, I'm having continued PC problems. I was having problems with random shutdowns. I thought it was because of overheating, but I'm pretty sure right now it's actually not because of overheating. It's probably some kind of voltage problem. I don't know. I have swapped out my power supply, didn't work. Uh, I was hoping it worked. It lasted 7 hours. I was starting to think, oh, maybe it was fixed, maybe it was the power supply, and then it shut down again. Which basically leaves two options. I know it's not the CPU because I've taken out the graphics card and I've ran a CPU load without a graphics card, didn't crash. It's not the CPU. So it's not the CPU, it's not the power supply, which means it's one of two things. It's either the graphics card or it's the motherboard. I have not yet bothered to switch out the motherboard because I've switched out the graphics card with my old 1060. I have a 2670 Super, which was the card that was giving me trouble. The 1060 works. Now, just because I swapped out a 2070 for a 1060, that doesn't mean that the graphics card was the problem, because a 2070 has a lot higher bandwidth than a 1060, so it could still be the motherboard. Unfortunately, I don't have a compatible PC to test the 2070 on. So basically, and I'm sick and tired of trying to fix the problem. The 1060 works right now, so I'm just running the 1060. So, and that's just how I'm gonna leave for now. I'll probably see if I can fix my 2070 somehow, maybe do a motherboard replacement. But right now, buying a new graphics card is out of the option because graphics cards are ludicrously expensive, to the point where you can even buy even broken, literally broken graphics cards go for 300 euros because people still think they can get them fixed. Now, I could probably get my 2070 fixed, but I'll look into it later. It's just not of relevance right now. So, I now have a 1060, which means that my graphical performance has gone down a lot. Which means that I actually need to start working on better graphical performance. So I've already said many devlogs ago that I had fixed CPU performance. CPU performance is pretty good. There could still be a few handful of improvements for it. For overall, CPU performance is not a problem. Right now, everything is loaded onto the GPU, which is good. That's exactly what I want because fixing GPU performance is a lot better than fixing CPU performance. So, what are the two things that I have been working on to improve the GPU performance of the game? First of all, I have switched back to static lighting. Once upon a time, I said that I was only going to use dynamic lighting for the game. That was a dumb idea. I realize right now that that was a retarded idea and I should never ever have done that. Dynamic lighting is ludicrously expensive on the GPU, which I didn't really have a problem with when I had my 2070 Super, but now that I have my 1060, the game ran at 20 FPS during like the worst battles. So yeah, dynamic loads is just not an option. The second problem with dynamic lighting is that dynamic lighting does not work for large areas. Basically, when you get to point light diameters larger than 20 meters, roughly, you start getting horrendous lighting artifacts, which basically make dynamic lighting unsuitable for lighting large areas. So I have pretty much completely switched to. So basically, a light in Unreal can be one of three things. So if I just get a point light, a light can be. Where are my settings? Oh, they're hidden. A light can be static, it can be stationary, or it can be movable. So I had everything on movable, which is totally dynamic. Don't do that. So stationary, you can have semi dynamic lights. So the lights will still be able to cause shadows and affect lighting real time, but you can't move them. Basically, the light maps are bound to a parameter, and that parameter can still change. So the lighting on a surface can still change. Static means what it means. It's just a completely static light, which is super cheap on the GPU. So I've now switched everything to stationary lights, which means I now need to also bake light maps, which has two disadvantages. First disadvantage was that all of my static meshes didn't have light maps, so I had to make light maps for all of my static meshes. Thankfully, was able to get a quick workflow going in Blender for that, so that's fine. I didn't know how to make light maps. Like I googled like crazy. How do I get my lighting to work correctly on trim textures? Because I didn't understand the concept of UV layers. I actually downloaded the graphical example map for Unreal, looked into that, and that's how I figured out how UV layers work. So that's great. So I now know how UV layers work. So yeah. Baked light maps looks much better. So let's just have a walk around. I'm not gonna do a comparison with how it looked before because it would just take too long, but let's just say the lighting looks so much better than it did before. I'm very happy with it, and it was definitely on my list. Even before I had to swap out my GPU, the lighting looked terrible before, and it ran like shit. Now it looks better, and it runs better. Fantastic. Look at those god rays. Yeah. And that's pretty much it. That's what I'm doing on the lighting part. The second part for improving GPU is actually adding level of detail. So that's why those two idiots are standing here. These guys are using level of detail. I have not yet made level of detail for everything, but these guys have level of detail. The level of detail means that the detail improves as you get closer to an object. You might not even see it. You can see it with this guy because his helmet changes color slightly. These guys have way less detail right now, but when I get close, there's the detail. Low detail, high detail. Low detail, high detail. Low, high, low, high, low, high. Yeah. Including the gun. Look, even the gun becomes low detail. Incredible. And this works very well. So before, when I spawned like 20 guys, the FPS dropped below 60. Now with this LOD deal, yeah. With this LOD, it's actually runs at 60 with 20 guys, which is fantastic. That's exactly what I want. Let's also show the arena. Oh yeah, and there's a reason why I'm back on this developer map and not the other developer map. Ta-da! Doesn't this remind you of Quake? It certainly does for me. It just looks so much better. I feel so stupid for just having done dynamic lightings for so long, only to realize that, yeah, static lightings are pretty good. Static lights are actually pretty cool. Because the graphical detail is just so great. There's just such a negative stigma to surrounding static lights. And to some extent, yeah, if you go too far with static lights, it can feel boring. But I think I will strike a good balance between... Because I'm now using majority static lights doesn't mean that I'm not going to use dynamic lights. I will still want to use some dynamic lights in my game. I'm starting to ramble. I need to hurry up. So yeah, we have new lighting. Oh yeah, I can also show LOD in Blender. So this is the high detail uniform. And this is the low detail uniform. And I can also show the wireframe. So this is the low detail wireframe. And this is the high detail wireframe. So the way this works is I basically just make a extremely low low poly count as possible model, and then I basically bake the colors of the high detail mesh onto the low detail mesh, and then send that to a low. Send that to a low detail texture with extremely cheap compression settings, and then run that, and that just frees up a lot of GPU performance. Okay, we're still before 10 minutes. It's not yet terrible. So yeah, that's all the GPU stuff. 10 minutes, very good. Alpha stage, yes, the game is in alpha. You can now play all 3 levels that I've made. You can play them from beginning to end. I've added the final special touch to the final level. Not gonna tell you what it is. because it's a surprise. But yes, the game is now officially in alpha. Doesn't mean it's still close to being done. Like, I still need to do a lot of graphical stuff. There aren't really any bugs. It's mostly graphical stuff. Just make the game not look completely awful. And a few gameplay improvements. One of the big gameplay improvements I need to do is pathfinding for the AI. Pathfinding for the AI is pretty good, except for the fact that they sometimes get stuck, and I really need to figure out a way to get the AI less stuck. It's not a critical problem. It's not like they start facing through walls or some shit, or do some like insane Cyberpunk 2077 shenanigans, but sometimes they just stop moving, which isn't too bad for ranged enemies, but for melee enemies that's pretty bad. So yeah, games in alpha stage. I'm aiming for a summer release. I know that I've like said I'm gonna release the game at X time, but I really think that a summer release is viable at this point, because this month this is the kind of like the first time this month that I actually had the feeling that the game is actually going to be finished. At least the demo. The game itself is not yet done by miles, but at least I will have a playable vertical slice for people to play. New machine gun. Yes, let's show the machine gun. So there are two weapons that I'm not happy with. That is the machine gun, and that is the old shotgun. So let's grab the machine gun first. This is the new machine gun. It is let's turn in the light. So yeah, it's a machine gun with a big rotary barrel. So I was kind of disappointed with myself that I didn't have a minigun. Well, technically speaking, I have a minigun in the form of the energy cannon. Oh. Oh. I somehow hit the... Oh, I see. My mouse... What is this? Ignore. Never mind. This is technically speaking also a minigun, but like realistically speaking, this doesn't count as a minigun. It doesn't fire nearly as fast enough to be counted as a minigun. Whereas this pretty much does. So this is basically a substitute for the minigun. I'm pretty happy with it. It's the old machine gun was by far my least favorite of the small arms weapon category, and it has instantly become my favorite in the small arms weapon category. Now, one thing it does do, it has insane spread. Like, it's pretty much uncontrollable at long distances. So what I've done is, in order to make this gun at least a little bit viable at close range, if you now crouch, this is a new gameplay mechanic. If you now crouch, the recoil of every gun gets halved, making these kind of like high recoil weapons. So if you just want to hit something at a bit longer distance, you just gotta crouch and you'll hit it. Another thing I had to do was make a looped fire sound. So usually for guns, I spawn an individual sound effect and an individual particle effect for every gunshot. The problem is this gun fires so fast that concept doesn't work. Not only does it sound and look horrendously glitchy, it also causes the game to lag out. So instead of that, it now uses a looped gun sound with a looped particle effect that basically just gets turned on at the start and then turns off again. And that's a lot better for these high fire rate. The fire rate of this gun is 1200 rounds per minute. I wanted to go higher, but honestly, if I go higher, the performance starts to drop again because of all the projectiles that are... What the hell? I think my mouse is like stuck somewhere. 1200 rounds a minute is basically the highest it can go without breaking the game and without breaking the balance, because if I go higher than that, this gun becomes just too good. So even though I want to go higher, 1200 rounds per minute, I mean, that's still pretty damn fast. So yeah. Another weapon I really want to change, which I'm not happy with, is the shotgun. So right now the shotgun for old fire just has a flame shot. It isn't a terrible old fire, but I basically have an idea for a better alternative fire that actually makes more sense on a shotgun, because what the fire shot does, it only just does a little bit of extra damage, and like the extra damage that the fire does is negligible. So I mean, I could boost the damage, but it's just adding a... Okay, here's the problem with the shotgun blast. Adding a damage over time fire effect to shotguns is stupid, because it's a burst damage weapon. Like adding a slow burn effect is just stupid, because you want to kill something as quickly as possible. So that slow burn damage is basically irrelevant. Slow burn damage makes much more sense for like large area of effect weapons or long range weapons. But it just makes no sense for a burst weapon, because you're gonna kill them before the fire effect does anything anyway. So instead of that, what I'm planning is having like electro shots that basically stun enemies in place. So you can shoot an enemy and they basically stand in place, and then you can do easy follow-up shots with your shotguns. That's basically what I'm gonna do for... And I'm probably not gonna change the model too much. It would be an easy fix. And then all the weapons are in a state that I'm really happy with. So yeah, that's the weapons. Another thing we're going to talk about is new music. Yeah, so I've uploaded a new music track. I have decided to not just use looped music. I actually have an idea for dynamic music. So I've already uploaded the first track on the YouTube. And I will rework it's just a rework of some of my old music. I've not made a completely new song. I can just use the old music that I've made, and I am using that to create the new tracks, which are aimed to be dynamic music. And I'm really happy. A few changes I've made with the music is that I have gone from C tuning to D tuning. C tuning was just a little bit too low. Also, my C tuning guitar has some slight intonation problems, which my D tuning guitar does not. My D tuning guitar is excellent. It's perfectly intonated, so I'm just using my D tuning guitar. If you're asking why not just put C, you can't just put C tuning strings on the D tuning guitar, because the C tuning strings don't fit. So I have to use the D tuning guitar. Also, I'm for the first time really happy with the bass sound. The bass sound in the new music track is incredible. It is this sort of like twangy bass sound, twangy punchy bass sound that's just perfect. I've always struggled with bass sounds, and I've finally got a bass sound that I'm really happy with. I listened to the track. Also, I listened to the track on my speakers with like the bass turned up, and it just sounded incredible, because every single note just perfectly punched through the mix for the bass. So yeah, and that's pretty much all so what I will be doing next month is doing LOD for every... So right now there's only LOD for like a few of the troopers. I will do LOD for literally everything. And for every like small mesh. For the big meshes I don't do LOD. But yeah, for all the small meshes, I will do LOD with like high poly counts. Yeah, the shotgun rework I will be doing. I will probably make the 2 songs this month as well, but isn't really like high priority. I also need to do the new lighting in like the levels, but I've already done that for the first level and it went really quick. So it's literally just a flick of the switch, so it doesn't really change much. And that's it. Just working on graphical stuff. And there might be another essay. I did my Battlefield essay a few months ago. Didn't really do well. I was hoping maybe the algorithm would catch it and a few people outside of my channel would watch it. Didn't happen. Whatever. I didn't have much hope for it. But I do want to do another essay on another topic that I really want to talk about. So I'll see if I'll fix that. It will also be a lot shorter and will just be mostly unedited, because I'm not gonna spend a lot of time editing again for something that might just not work. And that's pretty much it.